Live NFL trivia every Tuesday night on Twitch at 9 p.m. Eastern. Come show off your football knowledge and have a chance to win cash prizes. Check the link in the description to find out more. And now, on with our feature presentation. Some quarterbacks just walk into better circumstances than others, and because of this, have a better chance at succeeding and developing to the pro game. Of course, there are tons of quarterbacks thrown into terrible situations. They have a poor offensive line. They're clearly not ready to play. The coaching staff has no idea what it's doing. But with the obvious exception of expansion teams aside, I'm not sure there's been a worse situation for a rookie quarterback than what Philadelphia Eagles quarterback John Reaves was thrown into in 1972. He received just about the worst development possible, to the point where no rookie quarterback would have succeeded under those circumstances. And one decision that the coaching staff made was comically bad and woefully inept that it may have single-handedly torpedoed any chance Reeves had at succeeding in the NFL. This is the story behind the worst quarterback development in NFL history. Before I talk about the situation at hand, we need some context to understand just who John Reaves is, why the Eagles drafted him, why they threw him into the fire even though he was clearly not ready, and why they inexplicably decided to pour gasoline on that fire afterwards. In 1969, there was a man that was taking college football by storm. After Steve Spurrier graduated following his Heisman-winning season in 1966, Florida went through a bit of a rough stretch at quarterback. Their leading quarterback in 1967 was Larry Rentz, who threw 3 touchdowns. In 1968, the team as a whole combined for 2 passing touchdowns all season. But in 1969, that would all change when John Reaves became the starter. At Florida, Reeves established himself as one of the top quarterbacks in college football. During his first year under center, he had 2,896 passing yards, which ranked first in the SEC and second in the entire NCAA, only behind San Diego State quarterback Dennis Shaw. He threw for 24 touchdowns, which ranked first in the SEC and third in the NCAA. And with his strong play, he guided Florida to a 9-1-1 record, which in the over 60-year history of the program was tied for the most wins ever. Reeves followed that up in 1970 with another strong season, where he finished second in the SEC and fifth in the NCAA in passing yards and fourth in the conference in passing touchdowns. And in 1971, he finished second in the SEC and fourth in the NCAA in passing touchdowns and was the recipient of the Sammy Baugh Trophy, becoming the first player in Florida history to receive this honor. It was clear that Reeves was going to be drafted highly. When you're the all-time leader in NCAA history in passing yards, you've got a pretty high draft stock. And a lot of people projected that he was going to go 3rd overall to the Chicago Bears. I looked at a lot of publications previewing that draft, and all of them listed Reeves as an option for Chicago. Considering the fact that the Bears had the second worst offense in football in 1971 and had some awful quarterback play, including a game against the Detroit Lions where they had 6 net passing yards, and a game 2 weeks later against the Denver Broncos where they had -7 net passing yards, the move seemed to make sense. Instead, they took an offensive tackle. They were going to ride with Bobby Douglas for another season. And with that, Reeves slid all the way down to the 14th pick. And Philadelphia saw an opportunity that they could not refuse. There are some inherently awful quarterback situations to be thrown into. Usually, these situations involve a lame duck head coach or a guy on the hot seat where after 1 year, you have to worry about whether he's still going to be there and whether the new guy is going to like you. They also involve situations where you have to play right away, and situations where you have no weapons to throw to. And that's what makes what's about to happen in just a few moments all the more frustrating and laughable, because entering 1972, the Eagles had none of those problems. Let's start with the coaching situation. Jerry Williams was fired following an 0-3 start, and was replaced by Ed Khayat. And under Khayat, after an 0-5 start to the season, the team performed really well, going 6-2-1 and ending the season winning their final 3 games and 4 of their last 5. Khayat got the seal of approval from owner Leonard Toews, and the players loved playing for him. Linebacker Steve Zabel later said on Khayat, he had a way of keeping the guys pretty loose and pretty focused. His whole approach was a maul 'em attitude. Just go out and knock the hell out of somebody. Don't worry about the outcome, just play as hard as you can. So that wasn't an issue at all. Now let's talk about the weapons. Philadelphia had a strong supporting cast that a quarterback could work with. You had Harold Jackson, who was only a few years removed from a 1969 campaign with the team where he made the Pro Bowl and led the league with 1,116 receiving yards while finishing 4th in receptions and touchdowns. Jackson had an argument for being the best receiver in all of football that 1969 season, so he's a reliable target. You had Ben Hawkins, who had been a consistent option for over half a decade, and had a 1967 season in Philly where he led the league with 1,265 receiving yards while finishing 3rd in touchdowns and 5th in receptions. You had Harold Carmichael, standing at 6'8" tall, and who showed lots of potential in his rookie season. He would eventually become one of the top receivers in football in the 1970s, and finally, and long overdue, got inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame. And they had Gary Ballman, who had been a steady, reliable option for nearly a decade and made 2 Pro Bowls back in the mid-60s with the Pittsburgh Steelers. I talked about Ballman in a previous video of mine, so you can learn more about him by clicking the card in the upper right corner. And with the quarterback situation, Reeves did not have to play right away. They ended the season with Pete Lisk, the former AFL journeyman, as their starting quarterback. Now, over the first half of the season, Lisk was terrible. He completed 44% of his passes, was averaging less than 6 yards per attempt, and threw for 2 touchdowns and 12 interceptions while posting a passer rating of 30, which is worse than if he did nothing but spike the ball to the ground on every single play. And again, that abysmal passer rating was over the course of the entire first half of the season. But in the second half, something clicked, and in the second half, he was one of the better quarterbacks in football. He completed over 60% of his passes while throwing 9 touchdowns and just 3 interceptions, and posting a 98.9 passer rating, which would have been the second best total in football over the course of an entire season, only behind Roger Staubach. It was an unbelievable midseason turnaround, and Lisk was entering the season as the number 1 guy on the depth chart, with Coach Khayat saying as much. As you can probably guess, it didn't exactly turn out that way. Khayat flat out said when Reeves was drafted that he was not ready to play right away. While general manager Pete Retzlaff said that Reeves might be ready in a year, that definitely didn't mean 1972. Khayat said that only a select few quarterbacks are ready to be the number 1 guy right away, with guys like Jim Plunkett and Archie Manning fitting that mold, and that Reeves probably wasn't one of those exceptions. So now, we're going to play a game. When do you think Reeves played his first regular season game based off of all the information I just gave you? Do you think he developed on the bench, or got some reps at the end of the season? Who are we kidding? He played the very first week, when Lisk got hurt and unprepared Reeves stepped in. His first assignment was to go up against the Dallas Cowboys, as in the reigning Super Bowl champion Dallas Cowboys, that allowed a grand total of 18 points in the entire postseason. They had another quarterback on the roster in Rick Arrington, but they decided to throw Reeves in there and see what the heck happened. It did not go well. He finished the game with no touchdowns, 2 picks, and a passer rating of 42.1, as the Eagles lost the game 28-6. Now on its own, playing a first-round pick in a game because of an injury to the starter isn't bad, especially when Arrington is the alternative. But this is where it gets really stupid, because you see, Reeves was calling his own plays. And that's a problem, because Reeves had never called a play in his entire life, and said he knew nothing about defenses. So not only was Reeves now having to play and get adjusted to NFL speed, but he was having to call his own plays. During the game, Reeves called this reverse play, and went to the sidelines after, where Coach Khayat said, "We don't call reverses in that situation." Reeves said that he was shocked, and that he genuinely didn't know you don't call reverse, and that the idea to do it was just something that popped in his head. Now obviously, there's an easy solution to this problem. Have the head coach call all the plays. By doing this, and by putting the game plan in the hands of someone whose primary responsibility is to do that, you allow Reeves to just concentrate on finding open receivers and executing the game plan. And that's what Reeves wanted. He wanted the coaching staff to call the plays, because it was a lot to take in otherwise. But incredibly enough, Khayat, for some reason, said no. Reeves was going to have to figure it out himself, as Khayat wasn't going to call any plays. I cannot even fathom how stupid that is. Your rookie quarterback is dying out there, and wants you to help him call the offense so he can do his job better, and so that things can be a bit more simplified, and you're saying you don't want to. There are certain quarterbacks that can call their own plays, but a rookie quarterback who isn't even supposed to be out there in the first place and doesn't even want to call his own plays is not one of them. As for how the rest of the season played out under this trial by fire system, unsurprisingly, it was a catastrophic failure. Reeves was terrible in 1972. He had a game against the Rams where he threw no touchdowns and 2 picks while posting a passer rating of 14.4. He had a game against the Cowboys where he took 7 sacks. He had a game against the Saints, the team with one of the worst pass defenses in football, where he had a passer rating of 25.6. He started a game against the New York Giants where he threw 2 picks as his team lost 62-10. He started 7 games and the Eagles went 0-7. He played in 11 games and the Eagles went 0-11. The good news for Reeves' sake was that eventually, Khayat caved in. He took the play calling responsibilities away from Reeves and decided to let the coaching staff do it. The bad news was that this realization came in week 13. With 2 games left in the season, with a team that was 2-9-1 and was completely hopeless, and with a team that had scored a league-worst 110 points, averaging a mere 9 points per game, only then did Khayat say, you know what? Maybe Reeves was right with this being too much for him. Like, this wasn't rocket science. It took you 3 months to make this very obvious change that your quarterback wanted. By this point, it was too late. Reeves was playing terribly and got benched after going 8 for 22 with an interception against the Bears. Who even knows what was happening anymore? Because Reeves said after that game that he felt that he could see the whole field, and that was the most comfortable he ever felt during a game, and then said he played terribly. It was just a chaotic mess. And after 1 year, the John Reaves experiment came to an end. After 1972, unsurprisingly, Khayat was fired. The Eagles cleaned house, and it's not hard to see why when you go 2-11-1, finish with the worst offense in football, and completely torpedo the development of your first-round pick. Mike McCormack became the head coach in 1973, and decided that he was going to go in a completely different direction at quarterback. He wanted a veteran and acquired Roman Gabriel. Reeves would stay on the Eagles as the backup in 1973 and 1974, but would never start again for the team, and would finish his 3-year stint with 7 touchdowns, 14 picks, and an 0-7 record, becoming one of the biggest busts in franchise history. Reeves was able to stay in professional football for a long time after that, surprisingly enough. He was acquired by the Cincinnati Bengals in 1975 and played a few games for them. While there were some bright spots, like a game he had against the Houston Oilers where he didn't know he was starting until 15 minutes before kickoff, and then threw 2 touchdown passes in a winning effort, it was more of the same from a performance standpoint otherwise. Side note, if you want to learn more about that game, then click the card in the upper right corner. He then bounced around a few other teams, then played in the USFL for a bit, and last played in Tampa Bay in 1987 as one of the scab players. So what's the moral from this story? If you're going to develop a quarterback, for the love of God, do not do what the Eagles did here. Do not play him if he's not ready and doesn't know how to read a defense. And if you are going to play him, don't make him call the plays. And if you are going to make him call the plays, make sure that he wants to call the plays, or at least has some experience calling plays. Because when you don't, you get a quarterback thrown into an impossible situation that has no shot whatsoever at developing properly. Get your official Jaguar Gear 9 merchandise by going to jg9shop.com, and be sure to like this video, ring the notification bell, and subscribe down below if you haven't already, as it helps the channel out a lot. And be sure to check out Twitch every Monday and Tuesday night at 9 p.m. Eastern for your chance to play NFL trivia and win cash prizes. Link in the description below. If you want to see videos like this condensed down to 60 seconds, then follow me on TikTok at JaguarGator9 and subscribe to 60-Second NFL History on YouTube. To see highlight videos of players throughout the history of the NFL, subscribe to JG9 Highlights. Also, special thanks to all of our Patreon supporters helping the channel. Your support is greatly appreciated. See how you can become a patron and request future video topics in the description below.